Hey everyone, welcome to 3.3. Sorry, it's a lot this semester, this week. Can't say I didn't warn you. We'll make it through. Here we go. I'll try and be fast. We're going to be talking about federalism and how it divides power between the federal government, federal system, and the state governments. All right. So the big things you need to know is how to analyze the U.S. characteristics of government. All right. And explain the relationships amongst the three branches of our government. All right. So here we go. Federal democracy. This is the big one. Power is shared between the state and national governments. Indiana has a state government. The United States has a federal government, and they work together. State and national governments protect various rights and follow policies aimed at promoting and preserving democracy within the United States. When they work together, they're able to make the best policies for the nation as a whole. The federal government's job is to look at the nation as a whole. It sees the United States. It doesn't see Tennessee. It doesn't see Indiana. It doesn't see New York. It sees the United States. The state's job is to look out for its state. It's not as concerned about, say, Indiana, for example, it's not as concerned about Illinois or Wisconsin. It's concerned about Indiana and making things work in Indiana. And that's what it's supposed to do. I mean, you can go even further and say, like, the city of Indianapolis is only concerned about the city of Indianapolis, not the rest of the state. And so if all the cities in Indiana are they're going to look at themselves, they're like their own selves, and they're going to be interested in their own interest. Say that 5 times fast. And then you get the state level, and the state's like, all right, guys, we're going to work together. We're going to organize. All right? And they're looking out for their state, trying to make everything work in their state. And then all 50 states are going, well, how do we make this work best in our state? And the federal government's supposed to go, all right, guys, let's pool our resources, and we're all going to work from the top down like this. All right. So then there's this idea of presidential democracy. All right. And this is like where it's like an idea where like the president is the one who is most in charge of making sure that your rights and liberties are being maintained. All right. So the president is the one who is preserving democracy through the democratic process separately from the legislative branch. He's supposed to be like the pillar of democracy. I'm going to move my image here. Let you look at this fun little image here. So here's the president. He's voted on by the people. All right. These are the representatives voted on by the people. Notice they're not related at all. And all of these little things behind them are the people that voted for him. See, these are the citizens who vote. Yeah, it worked. Haha. Move my image again. All right. Constitutional democracy. All right. You can see how we kind of have aspects of all of this. All right. Is where the government in which the people elect officials who are bound within their roles by a written constitution. So we have a physical written constitution that binds government. That is the law. They cannot break the law. No matter what, they can do a lot of things, but it has to stay within the confines of what's in that written constitution. All right. The whole kit and caboodle, the whole process is by that piece of paper. You can think of, for example, like the United Kingdom. One of the things I found weird when I was studying government there is they don't have a written constitution. Their constitution is a bunch of laws kind of that have been passed through the years and just a whole bunch of general understandings and formalities. There's nothing, say, written down, one single document that says what government can and can't do. And honestly, it made me nervous just from a political science perspective. It made me nervous, but it makes you really think about how awesome it is that we actually have a piece of paper that in one place says this is what the government can do, can't do. There's definitely a gray zone there, but it's not nearly as big. Representative democracy. If that picture doesn't look familiar, it should. You've noticed the little flag there. That's our Congress. Individuals participating in government, that'd be us, all right? And we vote on people, these people, pointing at the picture, and they are the ones that make the rules. But we shape the process. We shape the decisions by voting on them to do things that are best for us and those around us. All right, moving my image again. Federalism. If you're sick of hearing this word, good. It means you're listening. You're going to hear it a lot more. All right? The United States government is a federal system. It means it's divided into multiple levels. I found this chart to be interesting because I'd never thought about these numbers before. All right? So there are 50 state governments. That shouldn't be a shock to anyone. We only have one United States government. It has 3 branches, right? President and Congress and the Supreme Court. There's only one government. They all 3-1 kind of thing. 50 state governments, 50 nifty United States. Yeah, there's a song about it. 89,476 local governments. And it gives you the breakdowns. These are literally everything, all right? You got this bigger number down here. Essentially, not every town has all the government aspects. So how many towns and stuff are there? There's this. But the total number of local governments, 89,000, that's a lot. They all work together, and then they influence the 50 states, and the 50 states onto the federal government. Yep. All right, so one of the most important things, a concept that we're going to talk about is parallel and dual system. You should understand federalism at this point. We have a constitution, we have a government, and each of the 50 states has its own government and its own constitution that controls that state government. The only big thing there is that constitution and their laws that they pass as a state government have to comply with federal laws. So federal laws have to be in compliance with the Constitution. They can't use powers that aren't given to them, But then the states are then held within those federal laws. So they are their own governments. They make their own laws. The laws here in Indiana are not necessarily the same as the laws across the border in Illinois. But both laws have to be in agreement with the federal law. And federal law gives them the ability to make those changes, those differences. It makes each state unique. So these two sets of governments, the federal and the state, they each have their own unique powers, and then they have powers that they share. Venn diagrams. I'm sure you've never seen one of these things. These graphs are awesome. You got things on one side, and you got things on the other, and you got things in the middle. It's changing the world. But they're useful. Thanks for hanging my sarcasm. So national powers, only the federal government can maintain the military. They can declare war. Postal system, y'all should be talking. You should know about that one. All right. On the other hand, you have states. They establish your local governments. They run your schools. They run commerce, which is like business, and they take care of the businesses that are in their state. All right. Marriage laws. All right. And then you got the people in the middle. Powers that they both have. And here's the one that we all love, taxes. If you have a job and you've seen your check and you're like, oh man, I made some money. And then you're like, wait a minute, I made a lot more money. And they took some money. They took a lot of money. Well, that money went to both the national government and the state government. They both taken a piece out of the pie. Now, that money is necessary. They got to run. They got to do the things they do, like run the military and run the schools and regulate the corporations. All right. Welfare, all these things are paid for by those taxes. We don't like them, but they're kind of necessary, right? Both governments can set up court systems, okay? So you have your state courts and then you have your federal courts, depends on the crime, right? They both control the banks. They can all borrow money. They got to keep things running. They both have the ability to punish criminals, provide welfare. So you have state welfare systems, you have federal welfare systems, and all these things got to work together. It's a mess sometimes, but I think we all benefit from it. And I think we can all see that. And it's definitely a messy system, and it definitely needs improving, and that's why we're still working on it now. Government's not perfect. We're all human. All right, moving on. Power to make laws. Each state and the government can make laws as long as they are within the confines of the Constitution. If it's not in the Constitution, they can't do it. Essentially, there are caveats, but we'll get to that at a later date. what you need to understand, it's got to be in line with the Constitution. Now, federalism has been interpreted differently through the years. The dual federalism, this that I've been kind of describing, has been the longest living version of it. The longest way it's been interpreted is from the founding of the country through the 1930s. We used what was called dual federalism. I'm getting tongue-tied, y'all. And we think of this kind of like a layer cake. You got federal government up here, you got the state government down here, and they talk to each other, but they don't really touch. There's something in the middle. The force. I don't know. Essentially, they're the enumerated powers, which are the powers that are like straight up given to them in the Constitution. All right, and that are the only powers of this national government. All right, and then so they are both what? They're equal. You have states and the government and the federal government, and they operate with equal power to each other. Different powers, but they're equal in a sense. They balance each other out. All right. After the 1930s, essentially the Great Depression changed everything, and the federal government had to start stepping in and taking away some power from the states in order to get us out of the Depression. And this is what we called cooperative federalism. Marble cake federalism. We're getting it all blended together now. All right. It had all the different states and the federal government are going to have to work together a lot closely. They're going to collaborate on what has to be done to get the nation as a whole working again. Because if you think about the Great Depression, even if you don't know the details, nothing sounds good about a depression so bad that we call it great. We had to fix something. It was bad. So cooperative federalism, they start sharing more and more cost and responsibilities. Fewer things are just state or federal. It becomes both. Everything becomes both. And the federal government starts trying to really control the states more. And it takes a lot more power. And it does this through federal money. So the federal government says, hey, if you start doing things like this, I got a big old pile of money here that you can have. But you got to do this our way. So say you got to make the drinking age 21, or we're going to slash your interstate budget by 10%. We'll take away 10% of your money. And the states are like, it's not cool, but we want the money. So they do it. And the federal government says, cool, thanks. Here's some money. Or you may remember something like No Child Left Behind in the schools. And the federal government said, hey, I know you're in charge of your schools, but we'll give you billions of dollars if you start running your schools like this. We think it's better. You don't have to do it this way. You can choose not to. We're not making you, but here's billions of dollars if you do it this way. And the states go, we don't like this. We don't like that you're in charge, but man, the money seems great. And the federal government goes, yes, it is. Thank you. So that kind of starts to turn into what we called creative federalism or picket fence federalism. And that is just the federal government taking more and more of, I'm going to call it the pie of power. The pie of power. It's late. But the federal government is taking more and more power for itself. It is using that power through the money to get states to do what it wants. And it's becoming a bigger and bigger organization. This is going to go on until the 1980s. There's going to be some economic troubles. Ronald Reagan is going to become president. And he's going to go, all right, guys, time to back it up. And we like to call this on your own federalism. And it's essentially going back to the way it was before the Great Depression, where the federal government does its thing and the state governments do their thing, and they don't touch each other. They become different. It's trying to go back to that layer cake again. It never makes it all the way back, but it's this attempt to get back to that style of government. And it has its pros and its cons for sure. And we'll talk about those at length in the future. All right. So the three branches of government, it's more of those ideas of separation of powers and that federal system. All right. You got the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branches. You should probably know what these are by now. All right. So within these three branches, they all have their checks and balances, the way they balance each other out to keep any one of the other. So one, make sure the other two don't become more powerful. All right. So your Congress is going to make laws. They're going to approve anyone the president appoints, all right? And they're going to have the most powers, or so it seems, because they're the most democratic. They're going to have the most elected people. The next category is the executive. That's your president, who's Donald Trump right now. And he has his own powers, all right? He can veto laws passed by the Congress because he was also voted on to be the guy in charge. And he's going to be appointing people to the judicial system, all right? The judicial, we don't think about it as much, but it has its secret powers. It can declare actions of either of the other two branches unconstitutional. And if it does that, when it does that, that executive order or that law passed by Congress and signed by the president becomes void, is done, is dead. It don't work no mo. All right. Tune in to 3.4, and we're going to look at how these three systems work and how they work together and how they sometimes don't. Check it out. Thanks, guys.